The morning sky over Atlanta shimmered with gold as the private helicopter prepared for takeoff. The billionaire, Charles Beaumont, stood on the rooftop helipad, adjusting his cufflinks, calm as ever. Cameras from his security detail flashed, capturing another image of wealth and power. He was America's symbol of success, a self-made man, a real estate magnate, philanthropist, and the face of Beaumont Enterprises. The news called him the man who built cities. But that morning, the city below him seemed strangely quiet. Just as the helicopter blades began to spin, a voice, shrill, desperate, and young, cut through the roar, "Don't get in the helicopter!" Everyone turned. At the far edge of the helipad gate stood a young black girl, maybe 12 years old, her braids flying in the wind, her eyes wide with fear. She wore a faded pink jacket and carried a crumpled notebook in her hand. Security moved fast.
"Get her out of here!"
One guard shouted, running toward her, but the girl didn't move. She screamed louder, "Please, don't get in."
"You're gonna die!"
Charles frowned. "Who is that?" "Probably some street kid," one of his assistants muttered. "Ignore her, sir. We'll handle it." But Charles didn't move either. Something in the girl's trembling voice made him pause. It wasn't just fear, it was certainty. "Wait," he said. "Bring her here." The security guards hesitated. The helicopter pilot radioed impatiently through the headset. "Sir, we're ready for departure. Weather's closing in. Tell him to wait." The girl was brought forward, her eyes darting nervously at the armed guards. She clutched her notebook tighter. Charles knelt slightly so he could meet her eye level. "What's your name?" "Amara," she whispered. "Please, sir, you can't get in that helicopter." "And why not?" he asked gently. She hesitated, trembling. "Because I dreamed it. Last night, I saw it crash right near the river. You were inside." The men around him exchanged looks of disbelief. A few chuckled under their breath. Charles stared at her. "You dreamed it?" Tears filled her eyes. "I know it sounds crazy, but it was so real. The sound, the fire, the smoke, everything. Please, don't go." For a brief second, the billionaire just looked at her. A child, out of breath, pleading with him about something that couldn't possibly be real. But something about her eyes, the raw sincerity, it reminded him of his daughter, the one he hadn't spoken to in years. The pilot's voice came again, urgent. "Mr. Beaumont, sir, we have to leave now or the storm will hit." Charles straightened, glanced back at the helicopter and sighed. "Maybe the meeting can wait," he murmured. The assistant blinked. "Sir, that meeting in New York." "I said it can wait." He turned to the girl. "All right, Amara, I'm not getting in." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're not?" He smiled faintly. "You win." For the first time, she smiled, a small, shaky smile of relief. Within minutes, the helicopter lifted off, but without Charles inside. Everyone watched as it ascended into the clouds. And then, a few moments later, a sound ripped through the sky. A boom. The helicopter exploded in midair. Pieces of metal and flame rained down into the Chattahoochee River. The pilot and assistant on board were gone, instantly. Silence. Charles froze. The very thing the girl described had just happened. She wasn't lying. His heart pounded. His body shook. And in that moment, standing under the black smoke, he realized that little girl had just saved his life. The rooftop was chaos. Sirens blared in the distance. Smoke billowed upward like a ghost reaching for the heavens. Charles stood frozen, staring into the sky where his helicopter had vanished just moments before. If he'd ignored that little girl, if he'd taken just one more step, his life would have ended right there. He turned slowly to look at her, the girl who had screamed for him, who had somehow known. She stood trembling, hands still clutching that worn notebook, eyes wide with the kind of shock no child should ever have to feel. Charles walked toward her, slowly. "You saved me," Amara didn't answer. She was shaking. He took off his expensive suit jacket and gently draped it over her shoulders. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're safe now." One of his assistants approached. "Sir, the authorities are coming. You need to leave before this becomes a media circus." Charles turned sharply. "Media can wait." His voice trembled slightly. "This girl just saved my life. I'm not going anywhere." He knelt again, looking her in the eyes. "How did you know, Amara?" Her lip quivered. "It was in my dream," she whispered. "I don't know why, but I saw you. You were wearing the same suit, the same tie. And then," she broke off. tears streaming down her cheeks. "I just didn't want you to die." Charles's heart ached, not because of the words themselves, but because of the fear behind them, the raw, pure compassion of a child who risked everything for a stranger. "Where are your parents?" he asked. She hesitated, looking down. "My mama's gone. My auntie takes care of me now. We live near the bus station downtown." Her voice was small, a whisper drowned by sirens and wind. Something in him broke. He'd spent years building towers, buying companies, hosting galas for charity. Yet right there was a child who had nothing, and she'd shown more humanity in one moment than he had in a lifetime. A police officer approached cautiously. "Sir, we need to take statements. The FAA will investigate." Charles nodded but kept his eyes on Amara. "I'll cooperate, but she's coming with me." The officer hesitated, glancing between the billionaire and the little girl. "She's not in trouble, sir?" "No," Charles said firmly. "She's a hero." That night, the news exploded across every major network. Billionaire Charles Beaumont saved by mysterious young girl's warning. Helicopter explodes. Minutes after takeoff, social media called her the Angel of Atlanta, but Amara didn't feel like an angel. She sat quietly in the guest room of Charles's mansion, sipping hot chocolate and staring at the fire. Charles entered, wearing a sweater instead of a suit for once. "You doing okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her eyes were heavy. He sat across from her. "That was very brave of you, Amara. You didn't have to come all the way up there." "I did," she said softly. "Something told me I had to." He tilted his head. "How did you even get past security?" She gave a faint smile. "The guard was asleep." Charles chuckled, the first real laugh he'd had in months. Then he looked at her more closely, noticing the small silver locket around her neck. "That's a pretty necklace," he said. "Who gave it to you?" She opened it slowly. Inside was a faded picture, a woman with gentle eyes holding a baby. "That's my mama," Amara said. "She worked at a hotel before she got sick." Charles leaned closer. Something about the woman's face seemed familiar. "Which hotel?" "The Beaumont Grand," she said. "Downtown," Charles froze. That was his hotel. He looked again at the woman in the photo, his breath catching. He knew that face. Her name flooded back. Marilyn Carter, one of the housekeeping staff from years ago. She had been kind, soft-spoken, and she had worked the night shifts, often humming while she cleaned the executive suites. He remembered her because she'd once helped him when he fainted during a late inspection. Years ago, when he was still building his empire, she'd called for help, stayed by his side, and refused to take the cash bonus he'd offered later. And now, her daughter had saved him too. He felt dizzy. The universe had just drawn a circle around his life. He cleared his throat, voice cracking. "Amara, your mother, Marilyn Carter. Did she ever talk about the man who owned the hotel?" Amara looked down. "Sometimes. She said he was rich but kind. Said he was always too busy to look anyone in the eye." That stung. He exhaled slowly. "Your mother was right about one thing." She blinked. "What's that?" "That man was too busy to look anyone in the eye, but maybe that changes today." He looked straight at her now. Really looked. Not as a billionaire, not as a brand, but as a man. The rooftop was still. The smell of burning fuel drifted through the air as the black smoke rose like a ghost against the morning sky. Charles Beaumont couldn't move. The noise of sirens below barely reached him. His security team shouted into radios, calling emergency services. But all he could see was the little girl standing there, shaking, tears on her cheeks, clutching that worn notebook to her chest. His voice trembled. "You just saved my life." Amara didn't answer at first. Her small frame was trembling from shock. I didn't mean for anyone to die," she whispered. He bent down beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did nothing wrong. You did everything right." The police and fire department rushed in. The media soon followed, and chaos took over the rooftop. Questions flew from every direction. Was it sabotage? Mechanical failure? How did she know? But Charles wasn't listening to any of it. His eyes were fixed on the girl who had appeared out of nowhere to stop him from boarding death itself. An hour later, they sat together in the quiet of his office, overlooking the city. The skyline stretched far and bright, but Charles wasn't seeing the view. He was seeing the tremor in her hands as she gripped a paper cup of cocoa the staff had brought her. "So," he began softly, "how did you get past security?" Amara looked down. The guard at the back gate was on a call. I just ran, he nodded. And how did you know where to find me? She hesitated. Because I deliver newspapers downtown. I heard the pilot talking this morning. He said you were flying to New York. When I heard the time, I knew it was the same one in my dream. Charles leaned back slowly. You dreamed it. Exactly. Amara nodded. Yes, sir. I saw you, wearing that same suit. You got into the helicopter and it just… Her voice cracked. It just caught fire. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Finally, Charles said quietly, Do you always dream things that happen? She shook her head quickly. No, never, just this time. Her small voice trembled. I thought maybe God was trying to tell me something. My mom says sometimes God speaks in dreams, but… She looked up at him suddenly, eyes filled with guilt. I'm sorry if I made you late or got anyone in trouble. I didn't mean… He raised his hand gently. No, Amara, you saved my life. There's no apology needed for that. Then he asked the question that had been forming in his mind ever since she appeared. Where are your parents? Her eyes darted away. It's just me and Mama. She's sick. Real sick. We live over on Jefferson Street. I help by selling papers and drawing portraits at the park. He looked at the worn sketchbook in her hand. May I see? She hesitated, then passed it to him. Inside were dozens of pencil drawings. Faces of strangers, city streets, children playing in the rain, a nurse helping an old man across the road. They were alive with feeling. One sketch, though, froze him. It was a portrait of him. She'd drawn his face from a newspaper clipping. The same calm expression. The confident eyes, the expensive suit. You drew this? He asked quietly. Yes, she said, eyes down. I always wondered what people like you were really like. If you ever looked at people like me. That line hit him harder than any explosion. He stared at her. This small girl who had risked everything, who had believed her dream enough to run across half the city and face armed guards just to save a stranger's life. He swallowed hard. Amara, can I meet your mother? She blinked. Why? Because I'd like to thank her for raising a daughter braver than most grown men I know. That afternoon, Charles's black SUV rolled down the broken roads of Jefferson Street, an area he had only ever seen from charity reports. Children played barefoot among cracked sidewalks. Old houses leaned tiredly against each other, and in one of them, small, paint-peeling, roof patched with tarps, lived Amara. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and medicine. A frail woman lay on a worn couch, coughing softly. Her smile, though weak, was warm when she saw her daughter step in. Amara, honey, you're late. I was getting… She stopped mid-sentence as she saw the tall man behind her. Her eyes widened. Is that… Charles smiled politely. Mrs. Daniels, I'm Charles Beaumont. Your daughter saved my life today. The woman's breath caught. She… What? Amara ran to her side. Mama, it was the helicopter. The one in my dream. It crashed. Just like I saw. For a moment, silence filled the little room. Then tears rolled down the woman's cheeks. Oh, thank you, Lord, she whispered. Charles knelt beside her, his voice gentle. Ma'am, you've raised someone extraordinary. The world could use more people with her heart. Mrs. Daniels smiled faintly. She's all I've got. Even when I can't walk far, she keeps the lights on. She's my little miracle. Charles looked around the small house. The flickering lamp, the pile of unpaid medical bills on the table, the empty medicine bottles by the sink. Something deep inside him, something he had buried for years under money, success, and pride, began to stir. He turned back to her. What if I told you? You don't have to struggle anymore. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, he said quietly, from this moment on, I'll make sure you both have everything you need. A home, treatment, school for Amara, whatever it takes. The woman stared at him in disbelief. You don't even know us, Charles smiled softly. She knew me enough to save my life. That's all the knowing I need. Tears streamed down Mrs. Daniels' face. Amara, overwhelmed, threw her arms around him. Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. He hugged her back, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. The warmth of purpose. That night, when Charles returned home, he stood in front of his late daughter's photograph. A girl about Amara's age who had passed away years before from leukemia. He whispered, maybe you sent her, Lily. Maybe that's how you saved me. And for the first time in years, Charles Beaumont cried. 2 weeks later, the world still talked about the crash that nearly claimed Charles Beaumont's life. Every news outlet showed the photo of the billionaire standing beside a small black girl who had shouted the warning that saved him. People called it a miracle, but to Charles, it felt like something deeper, something unfinished. He had kept his promise. Mrs. Daniels was now in one of the city's best hospitals, receiving treatment for her lungs. Amara was enrolled in a private school on full scholarship under Beaumont Foundation's new Dreamers program, a fund Charles created in her name. He visited them often, quietly, without cameras. Each visit softened something in him. Each smile from Amara, each tear of gratitude from her mother chipped away at the stone around his heart. Still, one question haunted him. Why her? Why that dream? One afternoon, as he waited in the hospital lobby, Mrs. Daniels asked to speak with him alone. "Mr. Beaumont," she said weakly, "there's something you should know about Amara's father." He looked up, surprised. "I've never told her much. He left before she was born. I tried to find him once, but all I had was a name from an old ID he'd shown me. A construction supervisor named Samuel Beaumont." Charles froze. "What did you just say?" "Samuel Beaumont," she repeated softly. "He said he worked for some big company years ago. I didn't think much of it then." His heart began to pound. His brother's name was Samuel Beaumont, a man he hadn't seen in 20 years after a family feud that drove them apart. Samuel had left the company suddenly and disappeared. Did he ever mention a brother, or where he came from? She frowned, thinking, he said he came from up north. Had a fancy brother who thought money could fix anything. The words hit Charles like thunder. He stood, breath unsteady. "Mrs. Daniels, your daughter, Amara, she might be my niece." Her hand flew to her mouth. Dear God. That night Charles sat alone in his study, staring at the family photograph that once hung forgotten on his wall. Two young brothers, smiling before greed and pride tore them apart. He whispered, "Sam, you're gone, but your daughter found me. She saved me." Tears blurred his eyes. For years he'd measured life by profit, towers and numbers. But one small girl had reminded him what truly mattered: people. The next morning, he returned to the hospital with flowers and sat beside Mrs. Daniels and Amara. He looked at the girl who had changed everything. "Amara," he said softly, "I think I owe you more than my life. I owe you my family back." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He smiled through tears. "Your father was my brother. That makes you my niece." For a moment she just stared. Then her eyes filled with tears. "You mean I still have family?" He nodded. "And you always will." Amara jumped into his arms, sobbing. "I prayed to God for help, and he sent you." "No," Charles whispered, holding her tight. "He sent you to me." From that day, Charles Beaumont changed the direction of his empire. He turned empty luxury projects into community centres, funded schools in forgotten neighbourhoods, and built hospitals in the poorest parts of the city. But most of all, he built a home, a real one, for Amara and her mother. Every Sunday, they'd gather in his garden, planting flowers under the sunlight. Amara would draw while Mrs. Daniels read her Bible aloud. Sometimes Charles would sit quietly, watching the girl laugh, so full of life, so brave, and feel his late daughter's presence in every breeze. Epilogue. The power of one voice. A year later, at a city charity gala, the mayor introduced the Amara Daniels Dreamers Foundation, an organization helping children from underprivileged backgrounds chase their dreams. When Amara stepped onto the stage, wearing a small pink dress and holding her sketchbook, the crowd stood and applauded. Cameras flashed, but she wasn't nervous. She looked toward Charles in the front row and smiled. "I once shouted to stop a man from getting in a helicopter," she began, her voice strong. "I didn't know why. I just knew it was right. Sometimes we're called to speak up, even when no one believes us, because one voice can save a life." Charles wiped a tear as she continued. "And sometimes, when you save someone's life, you don't just give them another day, you give them a reason to live it differently." The audience rose in a standing ovation. That night, as the city lights sparkled below, Charles looked at the sky where his helicopter once vanished and whispered, "Thank you." The wind seemed to carry a faint echo back. His daughter's laughter mingled with Amara's voice, reminding him that miracles don't always fall from the heavens. Sometimes, they run through city streets, clutching a notebook, shouting, "Don't get in the helicopter!" Asmoral. A single act of courage can change the course of many lives. When we listen, with faith, with heart, with humility, we find that the smallest voice can echo louder than fate itself.